to the February workshop meeting, Northwest Lake High School District. Would you please join me with the pledge to the flag, followed by a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and please be seated. Stacey, you keep call the roll.
John Cassiano.
Here.
Willard Delafer.
Here.
Joseph Fatzinger.
Here.
Todd Hernandez.
Here.
Becky Height. Here. Lauren Hunsicker. Here. Todd Leiser.
Here.
Rachel Scheffler. Here. Jennifer Cenobitis. Here.
Thank you, all present. Next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda, which you have in front of us. I don't think we have any changes or additions. And as a reminder, this at workshops, we do not take action. Any action is taken during the regular board meetings, which will be the third Wednesday. So we also have an executive session for legal purposes immediately following the workshop this evening. So with that, I would ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fatzinger,
Second.
second by Mr. Leiser. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Welcome again, and at this time, we will offer courtesy to the floor to anyone who would like to address the board this evening. If you would like to, please rise and state your name and the township in which you live, and there will be another opportunity at the end of the workshop meeting to address the board. Anybody like to speak now? Yes, sir.
My name is Brian Crumple, Heidelberg Township, Funderville Road. And first, I'd just like to apologize for 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting, I was up here, gave a little speech, and I probably shouldn't have been here. I learned my grandmother just died that day, wasn't in my own head. So I was frustrated, you know, I was over at the elementary here, and seen that first grade do a little sing-along, it was great. Like that stuff, that's great. Well, I just do that. But it's frustrating as well. When these kids are this tall, those who are fairly shy, and they talk pretty soft. And I got them across the gym with a diaper on their face, you know, as parents. You barely hear 'em. I just wish stuff like that could be different, you know. Getting a little tired of it, I guess you could say. I want to reiterate on what the fellow that was sitting here was saying about the 5% thing. These folks are supposed to be listening to CDC, healthcare professionals, all these people know what's going on, know how to help us. Telling us 5%. People, kids in your school get sick, faculty, whatever, close the school down, it's bad. Well, that also means, just like this fellow said, 95% of us are happy, healthy, doing fine. Since when's that bad? Just like he mentioned, like having your kid come home, get 95% of the paper, well, it's not good enough, kid. Oh shit, do better next time. Unless you're trying to give them a complex. I don't know what you've tried to do. Other than that. And I don't see why, I just don't see why this is different than everything else. Number of years, every couple of years, you have some virus go through, different stuff goes on. And we don't go through this. You stay home for a couple of days, you get better, you come back in, life goes on. Some people don't, and that's just the way it always has been, and it's the way it always will be. I remember one of the meetings we had, a woman out here, a nurse, you know, said her kid was complaining one day, years ago. Come home, why aren't my friends in school? Well, half the classes I was stripped through. It sucks, yes, but what happens? You get over it and you go on. I don't know why we're doing something so different here now. Why it keeps going on. I think what we had done, we looked through different data every day. We looked through different trends. How's it making things, how it's going better, how's virus getting worse, how many people are affected. We count the number of kids sick, we count the number of kids that might get sick. And what did we get for that? Doing this data can't tell us is what we're doing doesn't really make any sense. 2 years ago, this virus came about and we went crazy. You know, we shut down schools, businesses, We did everything possible virtually from our own home. And then we distanced ourselves from one another. We put caution tape, stickers on the floor, even paint plexiglass. We mask everybody. You step out of your home, you put a mask on. You clean everything you could possibly think of to clean. And what did it get us? Well, a year down the street, they come up with a vaccine. This is going to save us now. Well, for some reason, not everybody wants to. People are reluctant, which should probably be a whole question on its own, I think, but that's a little different. So people don't want to do it. So we bribe them to do so. Give them money, give them vacation days, whatever. I've heard many different stories. That didn't work. So we're going to now force them to do it. Well, if you don't do it, you lose your job. I work for some, not for too many. They tried to push a mandate, which didn't happen, thankfully. But what did we get from it? 2 years of all this precaution, all this is what we're going to do, this is what's going to help us, listening to all the people that know better. We're still in the same room, fighting the same thing. If this was going to help us, we wouldn't be here. But I don't know why we just can't have a choice. If you feel it does help and you feel it, maybe the last 2 years it hasn't helped, well, maybe next year it will. Awesome, great. Wear it. Wear it every day as soon as you leave your house, fine. But I just don't see why. If you can see what's been the track record of the last 2 years, the different things you've been doing, then why must we be forced to continue to do something that has made very little difference, if anything at all? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conkle, for your comments and for attending this evening. Anybody else would like to address the board? Yes, sir.
Hi, Jesse Mauer, 8536 Warren Lane. Probably tired of hearing you talking about the same thing, just like the rest of the people who come in and talk about masks. But so I had the privilege of going to the really nice Singing in the Snow with the first graders last week. It was so cool. It was so cool to be in the building. And I felt like I was like doing something wrong. Like, oh my God, they let me in here. You know, it was a miracle. It was a beautiful thing to see all the kids, but at the same time, yeah, I couldn't help but just feeling absolutely disgusted to look at all those children up on those podiums with half their face covered, singing songs. Like, this isn't about respecting each other and, like, you know, having beautiful words and, like, and saying things a certain way where, like, we feel like we're all comfortable, you know, with what we've said to each other. Human intuition is incredible. And to, like, sit there in the room, forget the data, forget the stats, all the stuff you guys want to assess and break down. All the information, I think it's quite clear after almost 2 years. Almost none of us know what the heck is going on. Well enough to be authoritative with most of these things we're being authoritative with. But the human intuition sits there in that room and you look at these children and you know the life experience you went through. Maybe you have a handful of devastating deaths in your life, but you look at these kids, how can in your right mind say, you know what, this is good. Let's keep doing this. It blows my mind. And I don't even want, I hate coming here. I hate saying the same thing. It makes me sick. And it makes me sick standing up and talking and feeling like I'm upsetting you guys, like yelling at you, you know. But look, it's on you. It's on your plate now. Enough of this. You need to go and sit and stare at kids with masks on and tell me you feel good about that. You can't. You can't possibly feel good about that. These things barely do anything. And we don't know what we're doing to these kids. And at some point, they're not going to feel comfortable with a life without masks. We're on the brink. We may already be there. You know, where there's no conversation about psychology in here. There's never quality in-depth dialogue about brain development, environmental factors, psychology, and how the brain operates in terms of when you set up patterns in your life for a set period of time, eventually you don't want to go back to the old way. You start spending time with apart from people long enough, your body gets conditioned, you don't even want to be with people anymore. And you think you're okay, but no, you're not. You're dying because we need each other. And these kids, they're not going to feel comfortable being in public spaces. They'll go to their friend's house and this and that. They're not going to feel comfortable in public spaces without these masks on. And right now, that's on you. And you should feel guilty if you continue to do that any longer. And I don't care if that upsets you. I'm disgusted and ashamed and embarrassed that there's still people today They think it's okay to sit around a room and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable with the data. Let's keep covering the kids' faces. It's embarrassing.
Okay, Mr. Maher, thank you for coming and for your comments. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Chairman of our Heidelberg Townships. Last time I spoke about trying to control this virus. What we're trying to do. And again, I still feel we're not going to control this virus. A buddy of mine, customer, kind of both, said to me the other day in my shop, he said, you know, I took my 10-year-old to the Penn State game because his other child goes to school up there. He's like, thousands of people in the stadium, no mask. He's like, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, going in through all the lines, standing there cheering, yelling, screaming. He's like, no mask. He's like, then we went out to dinner to a restaurant in town out there. No mask. Again, he's like, then we come home, have a good weekend. He's like, go to school, and I got to put a mask on my kids to go into school. It just isn't making sense anymore. You know, we get to our children go out in public, they don't have to wear masks. And it goes back to trying to control this virus. If we're outside without masks, if we really think these things do something, we're outside without masks, we get infected, we come back here to the school, it gets transitioned. Whether we have this on in this building or not, or we're still outside of here. You know, I think just being with other kids, playing at the park, playing, you know, grabbing handles on the boards. Right? That's another thing that cracks me up. We gotta wear these, but yet we're touching all this stuff. That boggles my mind when I think about that. If we're really concerned about viruses and all that kind of stuff. We have automatic folders, we have no touch this, no touch that. Guys, I just hope we make a decision tonight to move on with this and get these things off our kids. Allow the parents to make the choice. I've said that for a long time, and I'm gonna keep saying that. It should be up to the parents. If people feel they want to wear the mask, great, do that. You know, if you're not feeling well, you should wear the mask, then great. That's your personal decision. Shouldn't be made to do something. Shouldn't be made to put something on your face. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varner. Thank you. Anyone else like to address the board at this time? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Aurelia Lundquist, Lowell Township. I think you all know me, you know which side of it I fall on, but I wanted to say first, congratulations to the new school board members. It's my first meeting of the year. But second, I did want to say I have listened to the board meetings last month, and I was extremely grateful for the conversations that went around the table. I think it was the first time since we started having these discussions that I really heard opinions and voices and comments. And even though I wasn't here in person, I really appreciated hearing from all of you. And Mr. Delafer, I think you did a fantastic job of kind of facilitating that discussion and getting that started. So I first wanted to say thank you for that. And the second, the only other comment, you know, just to piggyback off of Jesse, off of Kevin, I know there's no decisions made tonight. I know that you've approved a new kind of health and safety plan, and again, appreciative. Just asking that we continue to evaluate that, and I know you've committed to that. You know, earlier this year, one of the questions my son asked me, and I just wanted to share with all of you. He came home one day and we were talking about going out, and he just said, "Hey, Mom, is the sickness only at the school?" And I said, what do you mean, bud? He's like, "Well, we go to all these places." He's like, "So am I only gonna get sick when I go to school?" And I know we all get that, right? It's easy to explain to the middle schoolers, to the high schoolers that my 5- and 6-year-old, this is really all they know of school. And that breaks my heart for him. So of course I explained that to him, but with all the other things that we have done, you know, we talk about the ventilation, we talk about the hand sanitizing, we talk about the washing hands. I just think it comes to a point where we are ingraining things in our kids where he's wondering if he should be scared to come to school over the sickness. And I know that's not our intent. Just something I wanted to share with you because I do think you're doing a great job. I do think that you're having the right conversations. But there are still these conversations that we're having with parents that are tough to handle. So thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Mrs. Lundquist. Anyone else at this time? Yes, sir.
My name is Michael Way, Weisberg Township. First meeting on that, I've watched him on YouTube or whatever, which I will say that doesn't do much good on the TV. What you're doing, that's beside the point. But it would be nice if it was easier to see what was going on. I could reiterate the same things everyone else has said. It's frustrating as a parent. On Friday, our son had a fever. We kept him home from school. He ended up testing negative for COVID. He had the flu, is what they said. We kept him home. He got a cough, so they gave him a steroid. He was given the doctor's note to go back on Tuesday. We kept him out Monday, Tuesday, just because he had one more dose of the steroid. He went to school today and was sent home because he had a cough. It's extremely frustrating. He hasn't had a fever since Friday. He's not sick. Now, his cough doesn't sound great, and I understand it to be a distraction to other people in the class. But like, Aurelia had mentioned as far as going back and reevaluating your system, if the one column has a cough, every kid is going to cough at some point. Maybe not every kid is going to cough at some point during the day, but they're little kids, and it's like he didn't do anything wrong. He coughed. He went to the nurse, and when she called to send him home, his response was, "I get to watch TV." I don't want the kid at home watching TV when she went to school. That's, I'm sure I'm not the only person that goes through it. I guess I just wanted to let you know, some of us.
Thank you, Mr. Way. And thank you for Tony. Anyone else at this time like to address the board? I think we have two left.
Great.
Well, there will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting, and yeah, I think we're on the verge of coming out of this situation that we're in, and ask Mrs. Holman to talk about the message that will be going out on email this evening, which you should check when you get home, based on the decisions that were made 2 weeks ago at the meeting within our health and safety plan. Mrs. Holman, would you just reiterate what's going on this week?
So for those of you who listened to the meeting a couple of weeks ago, we had an action meeting on January, I believe it was 19th, took action on several items at that meeting. One was a change about asymptomatic non-household contacts and what we would do for quarantine recommendations for them. The other healthy conversation the board had and decision at that meeting was that they, on January 19th, made a decision to change the matrix in several different places, but two particular, one being to more localize the data that is the decision-making metrics to be able to decide the face covering. We do still have tiers, as well as the information for extracurricular athletics and spectator column that you were formerly familiar with on the tiers. And so we agreed at that time we would make the change effective on February 2nd, which is today, make the decision on February 2nd, effective February 3rd for tomorrow. And so there'll be a message going out tonight to summarize the changes that were approved at the January 2022 school board meeting. The attached matrix, which has the changes that were presented that night. Additionally, the extracurricular changes that were proposed and acted on that night. So effective tomorrow, it will come out at 7:30. Effective tomorrow, February 3rd, all school buildings will be in tier 1 optional for face coverings and making face coverings optional for extracurricular athletics and spectators as well. It also details where face coverings are required. They will continue to be required on transportation, in our nurses suite and our trainer suite, as well as Lehigh Career and Technical Institute for students who attend school there. There are several examples. We will continue to monitor the data that is localized to school cases. We will take into consideration some of the Lehigh County data as well as Northwestern zip code data, but primarily driven on our school cases. And if necessary, we hope it is not necessary, but we'll be pivoting individual schools back to tier 2 or tier 3 if necessary. But for tomorrow, beginning tomorrow, all schools will be in tier 1 and required on school buses, trainers, and nurses, and all of the board members have a copy of the message that will go out tonight in front of them. School bus, Mr. Delphi said it is a federal requirement for school buses. It was extended till March something, so we'll follow that, and if that relieves, then we will certainly do the same. They did extend it to a day in March.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll check your emails when you go home this evening. And like I said, I think we're on the verge of coming out of this current situation. This health and safety plan, which was developed by our administrators at the beginning of COVID 2 years ago, has brought us through successfully through all of the trials and tribulations that we had to put up with with our Zoom meetings and our virtual classrooms and all of that that we have to put up with the last couple of years. And we are still following our health and safety plan. Part of the plan is that it can be amended and adjusted as we evolve and learn more about this disease, which it has been. At this time in the year, we always look at and analyze and then eventually approve the budgets for our partners in education from LCTI, LTRI-C, and the intermediate unit. And this evening is a special night because we have the executive directors and the financial people from all three institutions here to talk a little bit about their budget. So we thought it'd be a good idea to bring them here tonight so that the public who is viewing may see again who the leaders are in those institutions and introduce our three new board members, Becky Height, Jennifer Cenobitis, Dr. Hunsinger, and our new business administrator, Ryan Kish, who is been with us since November. So we kind of have a meeting tonight, so meet and greet and see who all the players are. And with that, I'll ask Jennifer, she'll walk us through the budget presentations that you brought with you.
I certainly will. I would like to introduce everyone we have over at the table first, and then, I don't know, they can pick straws who goes first. I'm not really sure. If you could stand on it just so that they know who you are. From LCTI, we have Dr. Tim Reshin, Executive Director at Lehigh Career and Technical Institute, and Mrs. Pat Fader, who is the Business Administrator. Thank you for coming. From the Carbon-Lee Intermediate Unit, the Executive Director, Dr. Elaine Ive, and Mrs. Tara Hauser, who is the Director of Business Services from the Carbon-Lee Intermediate Unit. And from LTRI-C, Dr. Ann Bieber, who is the President, as well as Stephanie Nestor, the Vice President for Finance from LTRI-C. So as Mr. Delacour said, tonight is the night that we approve all of our, review, they will be approved at the February meeting, all of our budgets. So this board obviously wanted to do put some names with some faces, as well as do a short presentation. All of the detailed presentations for each of their budgets is attached to the board meeting. We did ask them to be short and concise this evening and hit the highlights. And so by no means will their presentations hit the nitty gritty of the budgets. Should you wish to delve in further, the whole budget documents are on the screen, but we asked them to kind of hit the high points. Things that apply to Northwestern in terms of costs and or student membership at their particular organizations. And I think they will go through that this evening. Who would like? Do you want to go alphabetical?
Yeah, CLIU.
Okay, there you go. I see you drew the big straw tonight. Dr. Ive and Mrs. Hauser, or Mrs. Hauser, could you please come to the podium so everyone can hear you?
Good evening, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here. It's been, well, I've been the executive director of the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit for 12 years. Hard to believe. And time is so elusive right now for all of us after what we've been through the last 2 years going into the third year. But there's nothing like actually physically being in the space. And it's a pleasure to be here at Northwestern Lehigh School District. We enjoy overwhelmingly the partnership that we have with the school district. This evening, we are presenting very briefly the general operating budget. The general operating budget is what I call or consider the consortium membership dues, if you will. So it's the one budget that requires board action of all of our 14 school districts. And it is the one budget that requires a contribution from all of our member school districts. And there's a formula that is used to determine what that contribution is from year to year. I'm very honored to tell you that in the 12 years that I've been the executive director, I've never increased. I mean, actually, in the last 11 years, it has not increased. I have not increased the general operating budget. The reason that we haven't done that is because whenever we're able to do other kinds of services that would allow us to generate revenue, I'm able to use that revenue to reduce the application of an increase. So basically, the better we do with any kind of our entrepreneurial services, the better it is for all of our member school districts where I don't have to make an increase. So the general operating budget. Looking at the last bullet there, it comprises the curriculum and instruction and educational technologies departments, which provide services for all our member school districts, and most of those services are at no extra cost to our districts. And our building and maintenance for all of our building in Schnecksville, for our transportation facility in Walnutport, and any of the buildings that we rent or the spaces that we rent throughout Carbon and Lehigh County. We have to start this process very early. We have to start our budget process earlier than you do, because obviously the determination of what we do goes into your budgets. So in early November, I meet with the superintendents. Our superintendents meet monthly for SAC, Superintendent's Advisors and Council meetings monthly. And in November, we traditionally review the general operating budget with them. So they are in the know and they have knowledge of it way before anybody else. And then I bring it to the Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit Board of Directors, of which there are 14 members, one from each of our school districts. And we do a preliminary approval. And at that point, I have two numbers that are estimates. One is the PCERS number, and the other is our healthcare consortium numbers. And then, so we'll get a preliminary vote from the board of directors, and it was unanimous. And then back in December, I have real numbers for PCERS and real numbers for the healthcare consortium increase. And then we do a final general operating budget approval at that time. At which point in January, it goes out to all of you. And then you'll either call us here like you are this evening, and I'm happy because we have these new board members, and Jen got to do one board meeting so far with us, so wonderful to have you and do an orientation. And she's still learning about the intermediate unit. It's quite a complex organization. And then we have to have all of the votes back and submit them to the Pennsylvania Department of Education by May 1st. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tara Hauser, Director of Business Services.
Good evening, thanks, Elaine. Again, my name is Tara Hauser. I'm the Director of Business Services for the IU. I'm going to take you through. Thank you. Arrow. The arrow. We're fine for me. The lights off. Here. Maybe the power went out. I saw the lead.
It was pointed up at the ceiling.
Yeah.
So
I can say.
sorry.
It's not what we
As was said, our newest representative to the IU is Jennifer Sanavides, new board member. And if there's anything you'd like to say after the presentation, please feel free to do that as a new member.
Thank you. Ta-da, page 4. So again, I'm here to speak to you guys tonight about the general operating budget. This year, we're estimating our budget to be about $3.4 million. This is an increase slightly over last year by about $99,000, which is about 3%, which is below the adjusted Act 1 index. So our goal always is to try to keep our IU budget at the Act 1 index that you guys have to keep your budgets. And then taking into consideration over the 14 school districts, adjusted indexes as appropriate. This year we stayed below Act 1 flat. The increases are all related to normal salary and benefit increases. And despite this overall uptick in some of our costs, the district contributions will not see an increase, as Dr. Ive described, and we will hold district contributions at a total for the 14 districts at $819,000. You can go to slide 5. Thank you. This year's expense assumptions are based on some increases in medical benefits, which we, based on timing of when we put this presentation together, we're estimating at 12% over last year, or this current year that we're in.
I'm in 4 years at once, so current school year, with a decrease of 5% to dental. Our expected PSERS rate for next year is 35.79. It's about 0.75% over this year's percentage. We're estimating our staff salary increases, which are based on averages across our 14 districts, for teachers to be 3% and 3.4% for our Act 1 employees. Our ESPA negotiation was just ratified by our board right at the end of January. So those estimates will be rejiggered for next year. Go ahead, go to the next slide, please. Just to break down the revenues and the expenses for this year. As previously stated, we're looking at about 99,000 over next year. The bulk of the increases in the revenue side were just related to salary and benefits. So we have the offset for PSERS contribution and the Social Security contribution. We're estimating a slight decrease in the statewide system of support funding. This year's formula was based on the state getting some ESSER money. And it's not been clear from the state if they're going to match that next year out of their own budget or if they're going to pull back. So we went conservative and I pulled out about 30,000 of our state system of support funding for next year. That's what that decrease represents. In general, the SSOS funds are set to offset costs that for PDE initiatives, which the IU has to disseminate to the district. So that's the curriculum and instruction piece. Other revenues are premium share from our employees, general fund supports from our indirect grants, so intrafund transfers from non-revenue generating units. And again, your district contribution at 819,000, which is all 14, not just yours. On the expense side, CNI is up about 3.1%, again below the Ackland index, and building and maintenance is up about 3.2%, also below the index. If you can, thank you. So this is your contribution as a district is based on your weighted average daily membership and your market value aid ratio. The state actually calculates what your share is compared to the other 13 districts in our footprint. You guys are pretty much holding flat. I'm estimating that you're going to have a little bit of a swing, but basically year over year, probably your contribution to the IU will hold flat. Change the slide, and that's it. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns for me? Great. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
I was first board meeting last week, just very impressed. I believe there's 36 different departments with different budgets that you oversee, with an amazing variety of supports that are offered to our district and surrounding districts. So I'm happy to be a part of that. I did share, I am a school counselor by trade. I'm like, oh, I know what the IU does. I have no idea what the IU does, actually. And that was very apparent in my orientation. So I'm excited to learn and to be a part of the process.
We're glad to have you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I think all three, unless you're on the board or intimately involved with the decision-making as a representative or a trustee, you'll never know all of the details, all of the goodness that comes out of these institutions, but a lot going on. Thank you. Okay, I guess next will be.
Next up, I will
trustee.
introduce Mrs. Dr. Ann Bieber, who is the president, and Stephanie Nestor, VP of Finance for LTRC. You have a clicker. Hopefully it works collaboratively with you. And I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, good evening. Thank you for inviting us this evening, and thank you for your support of LTRC and all you do for our community. This year, we're celebrating our 55th year at LTRC, and we serve about 13,000 students annually, both in credit and workforce training. I did want to mention, I know Trustee Kistler, representing Northwestern Lehigh, was here several weeks ago, and I wanted to mention about the $30 million in stimulus funds. $11 million of that $30 million was a direct pass through to students at LTRC. We're still in the process of distributing it to students based on each of the stimulus funds that we received. The $19 million, again, is only a single purchase, right? They're not recurring costs. And those costs go from a new HVAC unit to relieving student debt We did that so far for 1,300 students, over $1 million there. So students had another opportunity to come back who could not go to school if they had frozen debt owed to us. $3 million in scholarships. So a number of initiatives like that, or special term positions that were only for the year. Now, we are hoping, because we still have a balance of funds available, and we're hoping we can get an extension, but we won't know that of those funds until the end of March, somewhere around March, April. And, but if we can, we want to continue to relieve student debt and scholarships as long as we can. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear with that. And if there's no questions, Stephanie Nestor will present our budget.
Thank you again for having us. Here's our fact sheet, just telling you a little bit about what your students are doing at LTRC. We've had 120 students in our head count for the fall. Well, I guess I'll move along because I know we have a lot to go through. This is our budget summary. We have a total revenue and reserves of $58.6 million this year. It's an increase of 8.1%. Our operating is based on an increase in our tuition, which we'll get into a little bit. Our grant funding, Dr. Bieber talked a little bit about the grant funds that we have. Our debt service, leases, and capital funding is increased. We had an increase in our lease at the airport because we're expanding that program. And also we have some projects, capital projects going on that need to be funded. One thing that's hard to see in this is that we did utilize $445,000 of our reserves to help us balance the budget this year because of additional expenses and the inability to continue to increase tuition for our students beyond a reasonable amount. We needed to use some of the reserves to balance that. Page 4, we're also funded, we receive appropriations from the state. So for our budget, we're anticipating that we will remain flat with the state at just shy of $14 million for our operations and about $1.3 million for debt service and capital. Our sponsoring school districts, the total contribution is $6,186,337. Again, that's our same overall amount for the past 9 years. Northwestern's allocation is $232,901. That's based on, and I'll go into that a little further too, but it's based on both the FTEs, the number of students that you've had on average with us for the past 5 years, and also a breakdown of how the market values of the properties relate to the other schools in your Lehigh County. For enrollment, we budgeted flat, the same as this year. Our dual enrollment credits are budgeted slightly higher at 14.1. Tuition and fees, we are increasing $10 per credit year over year for our students. We always use a Pell Benchmark, 6,633 is the anticipated amount next year. So our combined annual tuition fees and books is about 7,100. So we're just a little bit above that limit for next year. Our expenditures, very much, our expenditures have a whole, the grand total is about 73.1% compared to 72.9% of our budgets. We hire adjunct instructors based on enrollment needs, so that we're able to flex how many instructors that we have. We participate in the Lehigh Valley Consortium, so we're on the same PPO6 plan with the medical at 14%, dental decrease of 5%, and our other benefits you can see there with payroll taxes and retirement are also in our expenditure line. So as I mentioned, the total appropriation requested from Northwestern Lehigh is the $232,000. The breakdown for the operating share is $154,527 based on a 5-year average of 101 FTE students. Your market value is 5.151% of the total, all the school districts. So that is 78,374. So it's a decrease from last year of 1,742. Here's our reserves. Again, at the bottom, you can see where we did utilize some of our reserves to help stabilize our budget. We have reserves for capital, some of our projects, including the air handling units, as well as access control projects and some repairs that we'll be doing down at the Donnelly Center. We have designated operations of 11.3. Our operations reserve of 2.2 is based on our charter. And then we also have 3.1 million that supports our auxiliary and student organizations. Any questions?
Any questions? We had Dr. Bieber here 2 weeks ago to do a little bit of a review. She told us about the Amazon initiative and the increase in the programs out at the airport. I'm glad we're still using real people to fly airplanes instead of drones, but that seems to be growing nicely out there too. Any other questions? Thank you.
Last but not least, I will introduce Dr. Rushton from LCTI as well as Pat Bader, who is their business administrator, to present the LCTI budget.
Thank you, Ms. Holman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Ms. Holman alluded to, we're the third act of this show, but we're all part of the same team, and I'm blessed to have such great partners here, as I am with your member districts. Let me first thank the Northwest Southern Health Board for inviting us here to discuss our budget, and I was asked by two people I have a great deal of respect for to keep it very short. That's Mr. Gallagher and Ms. Holman. So I will hold them to that, and they will hold me to the same, and we'll make it fairly quickly. Dr. Bieber talked about the 55th anniversary of LTRI-C. This is LCTI's 50th anniversary this year, so we're very proud of that. And we actually have a time capsule opening, and we're going to be burying a time capsule in the spring to be open 25 years from now when I'm probably no longer going to be on Earth. But it'll be kind of cool to see that celebration. The reminder that LCTI serves 9 member districts and over 2,700 students. So it's one of the largest current technical schools in the state and in the country. Be very proud of what you have. It is your current technical school. Quick couple things about the budget outline. We, much like my associates here, start our budget process early. We present the first look at the budget to our JOC in November, at our committee of the whole, and our superintendents as well in November. Give some updates in December, and then in January, we give the final iteration of the budget. JOC passes it, sends it out to all of our member districts for passing. So our JOC just votes to send it out to the member districts to vote on the budget. At that time, the first look, we had almost a $250,000 deficit in our revenue. So we had to look at making cuts, and Pat and I wanted to provide a balanced budget without affecting our fund balance. So that was a tall order for our administrative team, but I'm very proud to tell you that we were able to do so with the promise to our member districts that program quality and the breadth of our programming remains intact, because the quality of programming is directly related to the quality of your current technical school. Always remember that. So we present to you a balanced budget tonight with no hit to our fund balance. So I will have Mrs. Bader talk about a few of the expense drivers. I'll go into a little more detail if necessary, and we can go from there.
Just like your budget, salary and benefits make up a big portion of the entire budget. So as Dr. Rushton said, we did look in our salaries to see if we could make any cuts there. And I'll talk about the personnel increases. All of our groups, except for the teachers have salary schedules built into their contract. All the other groups are on a one-year look back of our participating districts. So those raises ranged from 3.0 to 3.5, depending on the group. That includes our Act 93 administrators, our non-classified staff, our support, and our Teamsters. We did have some vacant positions that we removed from the budget, and that was the biggest savings for us. We had an administrator that we downsized in the current year because of some personnel shifts. And we have 3 career and technical instructors that are either going to become vacant in the 22-23 school year or are vacant in the current year. And they're listed there on the screen. Precision Machine is vacant. It's a 2-teacher lab. One of the teachers left and the enrollment was a little low there. So we took the opportunity to put that program down to 1 teacher. And George, did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
The Emerging Digital Media Program, you'll see there, it reads vacant. It's a brand new program. It's about 2 years old. Long and short of it is, this is a program that teaches students to create original content for example, a YouTube. It is, or students who want to become influencers, things of that nature. It's a brand new program, really gaining in popularity. But the original teacher had to leave. We have a long-term sub in there now, and that contract will end this June. But we found that by still maintaining that program, we're going to merge it into a common, what's called a zip code, with our commercial photography program. So they're both really nice adjuncts to one another. And the current teacher of commercial photography is going to take on that wing of it, and be able to offer 2 programs parallel with the same program zip code. And the last one, criminal justice / EMR. We had a nurse who supported the EMR program, but is going back into healthcare, is leaving teaching, go back into healthcare. And we have since contracted with Citronia Ambulance Company. And they actually handle our EMR training of our students, and we're still able to offer that industrial certification for our students with that relationship with Citronia, still maintaining a criminal justice program of 2 teachers, which is a very popular program. So again, our promise to you is to maintain that program quality, even though we have personnel cuts. All the programs are still being delivered in the same manner, just with less staff. Any questions on that? Throwing a lot at you, but that's important. Always maintain program quality and current technical education.
I don't have to tell you folks about the benefits and how they affect the budget. And you can see from this visual representation that Peasers is taking up almost 50% of the benefits, and healthcare is another 37%. Most of our benefits are memorialized in contracts, labor agreements. So we're locked in. So that's why we take a look at headcount when we're looking for any budget savings. On these 2 pages, I look at the other expense drivers, and the bottom line here, this is all of these added together. We have a decrease of just under $69,000. What we did is we reduced expenditures across the board. We looked at all of our categories. We looked at the 3-year average of the expenses in the account, and we're able to trim in a lot of different areas. But one of the biggest areas was in our IT area. And what we're doing is we are using our federal money. It's called GEAR. It's there in the middle of the screen. So we are removing a lot of expenditures from this budget. And instead, we're purchasing out of our federal money. And we believe in the 24-25 school year, these expenses will have to come back into the budget, but at least it'll give us some time to get the other expenditures in a good place. On the revenue side, there's a pointer here. So we also use the Act 1 index, the base index, to raise our member district contribution. And you can see that's 3.4%. We also have capital project costs and debt service, which we pass through along to our members. This is an important graph because as your membership in our school increases, then it increases the proportional share, the percent that you're paying of the budget is based on a 5-year average in relationship to everyone else. So this slide is important for understanding the increase that you are seeing this year, because as the proportional share increases, it does draw more expenses into your school. And of course, when you're in a consortium, that proportional share is based on everyone else's activity as well. For the other areas of expense, which is our capital project line item and our debt service, the proportional share is based on the market values of the schools. So your market values in relation to the others, you can see here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to see it this way. I'm sorry, here we are. Market value are doing the capital projects and the debt service. So when your market values change in relationship to the rest of the county, then that proportional share is driven out here. Debt service using the same market values. And again, this is an analysis of the proportional share. And then these are what I consider the three pillars of expenditure, which is the estimated cost, which is based on the 5-year average of ADMs. And then these two are based on the market share, market value. So this slide is the one that shows that, you know, I believe this was a concern for your board members that there is an increase here.
Yeah,
Can I address something directly? Is there a question I can address?
I don't know if there was any questions or concerns. It's just, when, year over year, I think 195,000, or I can't give the exact number, was an increase. And so I think they needed to understand the difference between where those dollars come from. I don't know if there's a concern necessarily, because we know part of it's driven off our student membership, and that's
Student
something we don't.
membership.
Yeah, your student membership has steadily increased, which is a very good thing. You're utilizing LCPI. Best analogy is it's like a commercial airliner. It's best operated when it's full. So those numbers are going to fluctuate based on changes in capacity and changes in ADMs. So that's a good thing. You are utilizing us.
So what's going on with Allentown, I guess, is the question, because that obviously shifts all of our numbers.
Yeah, that's been a nascent issue over the last 5 years, and there's been leadership changes and things, and now there's a new leader there. So hopefully we'll see that reverse. But when you have a large, they were historically our largest sending district, so we're going to ebb and flow quite a bit on their numbers, and that's what has occurred the last 5 years. Whereas the other 8 of the 9 member consortium in our consortium have all increased their numbers, which is a good thing. But Allentown has dropped, so that does change the balance.
We also have a small academic center budget, which is at the end of the presentation. I won't go into that now, but that's also available as part of this presentation.
One more slide, please.
Okay. So the way we can handle our budget is when we have excess revenues at the end of the school year, which means if our revenues are in excess of our expenditures, after our auditors have finalized our numbers, we return that excess to you in the same proportion that you paid us in that current year. So in January of 22, there was a credit on your invoice in the amount of $42,452.98. And so that's how we get the money back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fatsinger, as our rep to LCTI, you want to add anything?
Last week, I attended the meeting virtually, just because on the tail end of COVID and still having a cough, and I didn't want to sit there and cough like crazy. They went through this budget precisely and very easy to understand. All 33 slides, I think, when you did it, and it runs very smoothly, and the whole program over at LCTI. When I was on the board in the past, before our other member was on, it's just an amazing program, all of it, to see run, operate, and how they do it on such an efficient budget is really a testament to what you handled.
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, overall, I know there's some new members around the table. I worked in lots of places. The ladies and gentlemen at the table on the side are really good partners with us, provide good services both to our students, whether it's the intermediate unit, and services that we can't offer in our school district, where they can more equitably and more efficiently operate LCTI and the students that leave us and go there, or we partner with them for dual enrollment courses at our high school, a number of which our instructors are also adjunct instructors there. And LCTI being one of the premier vocational technical programs in the state. And so the programs and services that our students have, and the professional development and curriculum services that our teachers have through the intermediate unit are just second to none. And so everything you talked about sounds like a nice little package in terms of it sounds really easy, but there are lots of moving parts at each of those organizations that obviously then feed into our organization, both in finances as well as making sure the services are available for all of our students. And so they're all very good partners for us and our students. And so thank them for coming tonight. And certainly if there's any additional questions, we will cover them later, but if there's additional questions before, they don't have to stay. They probably have other things to do. We will go over any questions they have before they leave.
Dr. Rush, can I just ask you a quick question? So
Sure.
I think like the last 2 years or so being in COVID has really elevated awareness of skilled trades.
Mhm.
Okay, and so I guess my question would be is, we're living focus on the next few years and really trying to attract students to think about skilled trades, so think about, what can we do to attract more students to go to like an LCTI to learn a trade instead of having to think about, the only pathway would necessarily be 2 or 4 year degrees.
That's been an issue for many years. Prior to COVID, Mr. Gallagher has been a member of our staff for quite a few
Both
years.
schools.
That's true. So that's been a problem for some time, and the trades have been marginalized for too long. COVID made it even worse. Of the 40+ programs we offer, there isn't one that isn't in high demand. And I cannot produce enough students to meet demand. We get calls daily from organizations, from manufacturing to everything, to logistics to healthcare. They don't want just 1 or 2 students to come. They want we need about 10 or 15. And I can't keep up with demand. So what we've tried to do and are continuing to move in a direction of exposing students at younger and younger ages to it, because quite frankly, and you know this, I'm a dad, the biggest driver of where students go is very often where your guidance counselor is a big driver. And then ultimately the parents help the child decide. So we've actually moved into the middle school and now at the elementary grades to bring students in for tours and things of that nature so they can be exposed to it. So it's a constant. It was there when Mr. Gallagher was there. I've been in CTE for 15 years. It's been there the whole time. And we just have to keep at it.
Thank you.
So that's a great question. And if you can figure out the magic bullet, you will make a fortune. Yeah, because we'll write a book together. We'll make a fortune.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
Andy, you want to comment on that too?
No, I mean, in the partnership, the seamless pathway that we're trying to help the students when they leave LCTI, pathway to come into L-Tri-C with their skills and to add to it. You're right, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that these are 2 of the best kept secrets that we have in our Lehigh Valley, LCIC and LCTI. The IU, I think usually comes a lot more from the administration than it does from parents and kids' choices. But that school of choice, it's always been a challenge to top the benefits of that kind of an education and get parents interested and the kids interested in pursuing the trades and the programs at L-Tri-C. And the money they save by going to L-Tri-C for the first 2 years of college rather than dumping it into these 4-year schools for their general studies that they get in the beginning, it just amazes me that people just don't get it more than you do.
It's amazing, this area, if you think about where you live, this area is an educational powerhouse. It really truly is. The opportunities for all the students are amazing. And you can go to LCTI, you can go to college, you can get it all. You really can, and save a ton of money and really be overwhelmingly skilled and ready for anything this world has to offer.
Which is one of the reasons why Amazon, a worldwide company, picked L-Tri-C as a pilot for their technician training.
Well, I do have to say that was because of Mr. Delacour. You remember, they wanted to see the two of us, remember?
Yeah.
And we had to convince them and they wanted to say, you know, and you questioned them at great length as to their commitment.
Funny story, real quick, when that guy came in from Amazon, and I was gonna meet with him, I thought, what, do I wear a suit or, you know? I got there, I had my suit and tie on, and this guy walks in with a flannel shirt and jeans, and he's Jeff Bezos' right-hand man for technology training. I mean, it's just a different world. Well, thank you for coming, and appreciate appreciate your time. And, the budget is on your devices for review. If you have any other questions as you look through it, I'm sure Ryan can help. Because we will be taking action in 2 weeks from now on all three of these budgets. Okay. Next item on the agenda, we don't have anything under curriculum this evening, so we'll move right into policy. Dr. Sosnovi, would you want to do our policies this evening?
Absolutely, Mr. Delacour. We have two policies for the board's review tonight. The first one is policy 003 function. This was last revised in 2008. After reviewing the latest PSBA template, there are only a couple minor recommendations for the board to consider. Policy 004 membership was also last revised in 2008. However, there were several legislative changes since that time that resulted in changes that you see before you. For example, Act 74 2014 added to the school code language for temporary vacancy for active military service, as well as Act 55 2017, which outlined the training requirements for school directors, which our new school directors just have gone through. Finally, there was also recommended language for student representation on the board to provide opportunities for students to participate in school governance. I felt it wise to include this in the event the board would ever like to have student representatives from the high school come and take part in board. So those are the recommendations from us to you. And then with second reading, there were no changes as well as questions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I saw a student rep on there again. We used to bring students in here and they'd tell us what was going on in the school from their perspective at the beginning of the meeting, and then they left. Go home and finish their homework. I think it'd be a good idea if there's an interest among the student organizations. It wouldn't just have to be student council. I think it could be rotating through any of the organizations.
Yeah, I don't think it was student council before. It was interest to students who were interested in coming to the board. I did inquire with Mrs. Jadish about there was interest. I know our kids are really super busy and they weren't able to make it every month when they were here. But I will inquire and see if there's an interested student or students. I think the last one we had might have been Paige Stitzel, if I recall.
That's a will of the board. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Sosnovic about any of the policies? We will be taking action on the second reading.
I got one question, and it's a subtle word, but I'm curious how it's evaluated. There's a use of the word absurd in here. It says that neither the board nor the administration intends a result that is absurd. How do we interpret that word?
Well, point to me where it is.
It's highlighted in green under rules of construction.
Underneath 004 membership.
No, it came up under. Yeah, no. Came up under 000 for policy procedure, administrative procedure. I clicked on it. It's the policy you're talking about here. But it says code 000. Is that the one that's what's linked in here?
Yeah, we have 003, 004. Let me see second.
Okay,
reading.
maybe there's a link.
Board policy and procedure 000 for second reading.
It's number one short.
Okay, I do see, either that or the administrator intends a result that is absurd, impossible of execution, or unreasonable. And so again, it's language from legal, you know,
All right.
I could get a legal definition for what they mean by absurd, but I think that the application in this sense.
I mean, if
we
they've
weren't
written
going
the
to break-
language, then I'd say no.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I think
It's
the
an odd
intent is that
use
we
of a
don't
word
put
in a
forward
policy.
anything. Understood.
You get that clarified for.
Yeah,
next
I
meeting?
can't.
Any other questions about the policy? Then we'll move into, that takes us into the master facilities plan update. Art, are you gonna walk us through that?
Yes, sir.
Want me to enter or you go? Do you want to enter or you go?
No. Okay, thank you, everyone. So this is our yearly look, and typically we bring it to the board for a 3-year period. When we typically go through the master's facility plan or the feasibility study, we contract with professionals and we look at 5 years. And then what we try to do internally in the district is take a look at the next 3 years. And it's a rolling plan and it varies and it moves depending on what comes up in the district, but this is as good a look as we can for the next 3 years. So what we're going to talk about recapping the projects, the recommendations for the next 3 years. Like I said, a little bit on roof management plan, potential funding. I'll certainly get Ryan to talk about that. And then we'll talk about what's next for you guys on a board level for decision purposes. This is really just for you to take an initial look at. There will be further presentations next month and the following month to actually initiate some of this stuff for us. I'm going to recap here for the new board members and some of the existing board members. This is some of the stuff that we did already and we've spent over the last couple of years. Stadium improvements, middle school gym, infrastructure of the phones. That was a wiring project and new phone system. Dr. Sosnovic sort of mentioned that last time when we talked about the voice lines, when we were going to change the plans. That was the first component in order to make that be able to be facilitated. We replaced the high school water tank. That was for the potable water, the drinking water in the building. We had to replace that. We did some sewer repairs out in front of the high school. There was some issues and corrections that the local authority found and that we had to correct. The bipolar ionization, of course. Bus garage receiving roof, we had to replace that roof. That's in our facilities. And also outside, we did the baseball and softball fields upgraded. So we sort of re-leveled them, graded them and tried to get the water to run off. And we also did a little bit of renovations to the nurses suite, and that was for COVID. There's no real renovations to the nurses. It was just sort of to get them into compliance of what was needed at the time for COVID.
Are those sewer repairs all corrected now, that effluent that we had for the stormwater?
They are. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, as we look back as well, this is some previously planned projects. And when we say previously planned, it's something that we brought forward to the board, whether it got delayed because of board action or it gets delayed just because of timing. It's a mix of both. So the middle school HVAC, we talked about that extensively. That's still out there on the table. And we put some numbers here for you. Estimated cost of 2020, estimated cost of today. There is a drastic increase. I'm sure everybody's aware of supply chain and the cost increases. So it's just something to look at as these things project out further and further, they get more and more expensive. It's just basic economics, as you guys would know. Middle school auditorium, middle school site work, configuration. If you remember at the time, that middle school project, it involved creating an LGI room for the middle school as the teachers and the faculty and the group that they met in the library in a big pod all spread out or in the auditorium. This was to facilitate an actual large group instruction room that they could then take students into in groups and pods. It's something the middle school doesn't have. We included it in the high school and it's been very successful. So it was something we were going to do in the middle school as well. District-wide building envelope, that's something that was just sort of
doing some weather sealing around windows, doors. And with school code, as we get into numbers, it sounds easy to just go calculate a window or two. It's such a massive project, it turns into bidding requirements. There's school codes for how much you can spend internally, how much you have to contract out. It turns into a $100,000 project really quick. There's a sprinkler that we need to fix as well in the middle school. And there's an operations building, there was a toilet break room, sort of segregated for, it's really the B&G people, the buildings and grounds people that are on one side, transportation's on the other side, and there's a working garage where we work on the buses in the middle. And it was just to sort of give us space for those people as well. That's something that is handled with a budget line item that we have in our capital fund. And it's sort of in design. It's not out to bid or any of that stuff yet. That would come back to board for approval to go out to bid, but that's why it's marked as design. We have Alloy 5 working on it for us. Any questions on anything on that sheet?
Is that sprinkler thing something urgent?
It is not. It is something that we've addressed and it will need to be addressed further, but as of right now, it's not a safety issue. So as we go forward, we're looking at next year, 22, 23, some of the planned stuff. This is where it gets into some board action that will be required for you to say yes or no to. Middle school water line replacement, that is the current project that's under design. That budget is already taken care of and it's accounted for. And certainly Ryan will talk about that. Where that process is we have already contracted with a professional. It's being designed. It's sitting in DEP's desk for approval. So as soon as DEP gets us that approval, it will go out to bid. And that is a replacement for the water line. The well for the new board members is by the stadium. It has to go all the way across the field and into the middle school. It's leaking. We have a backflow preventer on it so we don't burn up the well, but it has to get replaced. It's original to the building. It's one of those things that just wear out. District-wide smaller capital projects, that $100,000 line item that we occur, that's for anything. And that includes that operations toilet, break room up there. It's also driveway repairs, sealing of the driveways, anything that's a capital project would come out of that fund. And that's something that previously Leslie would keep and now Ryan is holding in the budget as far as part of that. The next project that we'll be looking at is the bus yard upgrades. And what that is, just a brief snapshot, because that will come to you next month for a full presentation so you actually see what these three projects are. It's a new gasoline tank. There's currently a diesel tank up there. We're buying more and more gas buses. We have gas vans. We have gas PG vehicles. We put a tank up there, economy of size, bring in a tanker load of gasoline, and then we would be able to fuel diesel and gas up in the bus yard and not have to go to a fueling station. There's also some driveway repairs that are up there. It's complicated. Some of the gate area for the bus yard, it's not holding up to the bus traffic, just the sheer weight of the vehicles. It's sort of sinking. There's a big depression. The man gate where the drivers have to walk through need to be addressed. The driveway right when you come into the middle school, if you go through parent pickup, if you could feel that swale, imagine that in a bus every single day. So it's just as bad. So that has to be addressed. And then some lighting up there for the drivers as they come in would be addressed as well, part of that project. Middle school site lighting and signage. What that is, if you've ever been up to the middle school in the middle of the night for a game, you know that we have that stanchion that sits up by the flagpole and shines the light down. That's the only lighting that we have up there. There is no actual lighting in the front of that middle school. So that would just be lighting for the front of that building. The signage component of it is just to identify the main office from the gymnasium. People come up to the building, they're not sure which side is actually the main office. It's not the sign out in the road, it's signage on the building. It also includes a sign for the high school because we have Northwestern Lehigh on the high school, but we do not have the high school on the high school. So it's just a sign for there as well. And again, that will also come next month as a project. You'll get to see a little bit of a drawing and you'll be able to make a decision on what you want to do. Any questions on that? Okay. 23, 24, as we project out, we would like to bring back that middle school auditorium as a project upon itself. When we previously talked about the middle school renovations, we were talking about everything. For scale, for purposes of being able to fund it, we would like to pull out the middle school auditorium independently and bring it forward with you. The reason that it's out to 23, 24, it'll take that long to get developed if you so choose. And that's something that will come within the next month or two. And again, just that $100,000 line item again is helped. 24, 25. Now we get into some of our roofs that are up on warranty and extended out. I will discuss that more next month with you. I'll bring forward the roof management plan that we use. Ryan does include some of it in his budget, and you'll see that in the next couple slides, how we fund some of that stuff. There's a lot of options. Roofing is always a question, but there's options to either renew, restore, replace, or buy a new warranty. So there's many of options to keep us current with roofs, so we're not falling in disrepair, that don't necessarily involve replacing the whole thing. So that 2 million could turn into 1 million if we're able to restore or we're able to extend roofing out. So it's a question of one. It's always something that we use to try to balance our numbers the best we can. Some of the capital projects in the future, just the things that are still left out there. We have the high school, middle school kitchen, cafeteria renovations. As far as the high school goes, the back hallway down here at the end of the high school, it's the only area of the high school that has not been touched. Every other part of the high school has been renovated over the last 20 years or so through the planning of the board and the use of funds. So just we get down into this last section, we have the original kitchen area where we're serving the students. The serving lines have been upgraded a little bit. The cafeteria is laid out in sort of sections if you've been in there. So some renovations are probably in order down there, and as well in the middle school kitchen. Again, it's in really good shape up there in the middle school, but it is approaching 30 years old at this point. We talk about the middle school site work. Basically what that is all of the other work outside of the site lighting. There's a little bit of drainage work that has to be done in the back. There's some driveway stuff. There's some site lighting that should be improved up by the auditorium entrance in the parking lot pavement. And down below, there's some work that needs to be done down there as well. These are just things that we just want to keep out there and so you know about them. The middle school reconfiguration in LGI room, if you decide to go back to that, that's something that's on the plan. The HVAC in the middle school, that is something that we've talked extensively about. As you can see, that number is a little scary, but it's something nonetheless that at some point we will have to address. And again, we just keep that district-wide capital projects. As we move in, I will certainly turn this over to Ryan so that he can explain the numbers and how we propose to fund this without doing a borrow.
So we have several different funding sources for our capital projects. And remember, our capital reserve fund is separate from our general fund. It can only be funded through general fund transfers and be used for capital projects and fleet replacements. So as part of our capital reserve, we had earmarked dollars for general projects. You'll see at the top on the top row, as well as our roof management plan and turf replacement. Capital projects is the remainder of the bond proceeds and has restrictions on how that is spent. And our available general fund balance, you'll see later on, we have assigned fund balance for capital projects, but by leaving that money in the general fund, it gives us the flexibility. And although we plan on using it for capital projects, once you move that money into the capital reserve, you can't move it back. So in that second column, our general projects, you'll see that we started with an estimated fund balance of $2 million, a little over $2 million. You add in additions of $159,000, which is our planned general fund transfer that would happen in June of 2022 that we budget for as part of our general fund. And then a reduction with expenditures of $100,000 for those district-wide small capital projects. The next column is our roof management project. We start with a fund balance of $900,000 in that. We have a general fund plan, general fund transfer of $300,000. That is part of our general fund for June 2022. And then we had that bus garage roof that I talked about earlier for $169,000. Our capital reserve turf replacement starts off with fund balance of 142,000. And we're adding to that this year, no expenditures of 71,000, building that up to replace the turf. So that's it. If we move on to our next year, you'll see that in that first column, you have the 154,000. We have the same additions with the roof management project, 300,000. And you have that LVHN sponsorship, which I should have talked about on the last slide, but that's a combination of your LVHN sponsorship and the athletic trainer savings. So our expenditures in that first column, that middle school water line replacement that was previously talked about would be funded through a combination of that capital projects, basically drawing that $109,000 down, and general projects. The small capital projects, 100,000 is next in that column. The middle school site lighting and signage, 297,000, and the bus yard upgrades would all come out of that capital reserve general projects column. Once again, the next column you're adding to the roof management project costs with nothing coming out of that, taking that to 1.3 million and the turf to 284,000. You move on to 23-24. You have the same transfers as the previous slides, 154,000 in general projects, 300,000 in roof management, and 71,000 for turf replacement. But in 23-24, we're also utilizing $1.3 million to cover the cost of the middle school auditorium upgrades and the $100,000 for the small capital projects. So that exhausts our capital reserve general projects earmark part of our capital reserve, and we are increasing roof management and turf replacement with no expenditures coming out. Moving on to 24-25, again, the same additions for general projects, roof management, and turf replacement. Transferring the additional general fund balance of 69,000 to fund $2 million in anticipated expenditures for roof management. And you'll see you're drawing down, you're spending $100,000 again on the small capital projects in general projects, but that fund balance is now slowly building back up after exhausting it in the previous year. So any of those additional projects that Art talked about beyond what's planned for in 24-25 is likely to result in borrowing. Anyone?
Is that LVHN sponsorship for the turf, that agreement that we made with them when we put the turf in for 3 years now? Is that a fixed amount every year?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the life of the turf expected to be? Was that
They expected 15 years.
15, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
It's kind of warranted over around 10 or 8, I mean, but they expect 12 to 15 years for the last.
That was part of the board's decision for the turf, was to take that money, the sponsorship money, and put it in escrow here for, I don't know if that's the right term, but to put it in our fund balance to replace the turf when that time comes, so we're not just at a $1 million turf replacement, that's another roof.
Right, so you had a plan and the money allocated over time, so when it needs to be replaced, it's available for you to use towards that project.
So again, anything that's not in there, what Art talked about with capital projects future, you have that 6.3 million middle school HVAC. That might, end up being a borrowing at that time, because we are depleting our capital reserve pretty good.
What's the lowest the capital reserve has ever gone down to, Bill? Do you remember? Do you have it? I don't have it. That's a low number I've seen in my time before.
Well, capital reserve, we started just building up. So you remember we used to do, I want to say 100 or 150,000 a year. We just more recently increased it to 300 over the last few years to be able to add more to that. My old budget should have.
It's always been a relatively much more compared to some of the other fund balances that we have. Really, you can use capital reserve for buses, buildings.
That's it, capital improvements and student transportation.
That's it, for buses and buildings.
Well, it's anything they capitalize, so
anything that's a capital expense would go.
Now, I'll just talk about this last slide for you guys. And I apologize, there's an end error there. The January and February at the end should be 23. So I'll fix that for the final board meeting. But so next month, we're going to bring forward with Alvin 5 and Alvin Bush, who is our construction manager, a small presentation for you about the middle school site lighting, the bus yard upgrades, and the middle school auditorium, and that's so you can see that. What would ideally happen if you decide to move forward with those projects is in April, we at least contract with the professionals to start designing them. The middle school auditorium certainly is a big design process. The site lighting and the bus yard upgrades, not as intensive, but just as important to get going in the right timeline, because you have to. The nature of bidding and construction right now, it has to be bid appropriately, or else you're gonna get bad windows, you're gonna get bad bids, and probably more expensive. So if we go forward in April, and again, this is strictly just for designing purposes, you have not yet approved the project at that point. You're still going to have a different time to actually approve the project, but it does come at a cost for the professionals to design this stuff. September, October, we'll review those projects, and you'll actually get to sort of look at them in the final stage and say yes or no, go out to bid. If you approve them to go out to bid, they would go out to bid in November. We would probably bring back those bid approved projects in December, receive them February, maybe award them if everything is reviewed and properly. So it's sort of just a progression at the point of, for the board's sake, for the new board members. If you approve the professionals to start designing them, that's a cost that we have to incur, certainly. Then the project comes back and you have to say yes for us to go out to bid, and I'm going by past board practice. So you'll have to say yes again to go to the street, and it goes out to bid. Then it comes back as a bid, and you're going to look at those numbers. We're going to give a recommendation for the lowest bid. It's going to be the lowest qualified bidder, and you're going to say yes or no. And at that point is really when you're saying yes to the project, just so you see how it all plays out. So it's kind of a multiple step process, and this moment, please add in if I'm missing something.
I mean, this is typically the process. The board has always asked for a high level look of all the things so that you could consider it and everything else in terms of how you prioritize things. You know, obviously we have limited funds across the board, and trying to figure out how you prioritize all the funds that you have and how you spend money over time. And so we've typically brought you a 3-year, 4-year look, and then, as Mr. Oak said, bring back the architects, which will present exactly what's included in those projects that are up. So you will get to see pictures, and you will get to see, I say diagrams, but not specific diagrams about the middle school site lighting, the bus yard upgrades, and the middle school auditorium. At next meeting, at not February, March's workshop meeting, and then move forward from there if you wish to move forward with those projects. And you can move forward with 1, you can move forward with 2, you can move forward with 3, you can move forward with 9. And so you see the about cost there. I mean, they're obviously estimates. You don't know the cost until you go out to bid, but you obviously have money invested at that point. So if it's not a project that you are looking at the cost of and saying, yeah, that's something I'm willing to do, then you probably don't at this time want to invest money in terms of the development of those costs, because there is costs for both of the professional services at that time to develop them, to go out to bid. It's obviously not the total of the project, but it's professional services fees.
Yeah.
And so the next 3 on the list are the middle school site lighting, the bus yard upgrades, and the middle school auditorium. At some point, somebody asked about a tour of some of the things. I mean, you certainly can look at the middle school auditorium or the bus yard for that matter. Middle school auditorium has been talked about from the board members who've been here, because it was included in a large middle school project that would have necessitated a borrowing, because it was the HVAC, all of the LGI, as well as the auditorium. In the middle school auditorium is our largest auditorium in the district, and has had some sound issues in terms of productions and things in that space, as well as the HVAC came up directly after we had the mold issue, if you recall, because of some humidity and that system being activated and not having the ability to release the humidity. So at some point, that middle school HVAC, and you know, you say kick the can, I think someone said, yeah, kick the can until the can doesn't work anymore. And so you're on that time, it works until it doesn't. And so middle school heating HVAC system at some point, which is a large ticket item you can't do out of fund balance and you'll need to borrow for, is still on the table at some point. So this is the typical process, but you need to give us some feedback along the way about what you want to see, and moving forward, what you want to proceed with, so that we prepare the appropriate document.
Yeah, and for full clarity, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, if you decide to go forward with a project for full response, what happens is the money for the professionals can be rolled into that capital fund, but if it's in 2 different budget years, we have to pay for that out of our regular budget. Is that correct? You can only do that if you actually approve the project and the project moves forward, the funds for the, so if the architect costs, I'm just gonna say $500,000 to design an auditorium, if that project doesn't go to fruition, it cannot come out of capital. Is that correct? Right. That's correct, yeah. It comes out of our general fund balance, so it comes out of our general budget, so that's where it gets costly. You have to balance that, and that's the decision you have to make, and that's why we bring forward full clarity. This is why we need to hire the professionals first, and it may be at our expense if we don't move forward or come out of our general budget.
Or would all these projects have to be done in the summer months when school's out?
They do not. As a matter of fact, we don't think any of them do. The
Except for the
auditorium, when we were originally talking about that, we were gonna go right after the spring musical. We were gonna take over the auditorium, so we could start that, I think, in May. And go forward through the summer, and then we have a month or 2 in the fall to finish it. The bus yard and the lighting upgrades can happen at any time.
The water replacement that we're currently in
Water
process.
does, yeah,
we will do
that's
in summer.
without question. I'm not taking a chance of not having
Have
water in the middle school. So that'll probably be next summer because it's not going to get to the street in time for this year. It's not worth the risk.
The interesting part or difficult part in terms of operations thing is one, you obviously have to invest some money in your capital buildings, it's when and where and how. But there's long lead times, as you see. There's many months involved in the planning and then putting things out to bid and then them coming back and then having to be able to, especially in this day and age, 16-week procurement of materials. Like, so now you are way out in terms of some of the materials, like you're starting things now that you're talking about for next summer in some cases. But there's that long lead time. You can't wait until then or you're out another summer.
Any
So-
questions?
So next month, you'll be bringing us something back that you guys have created within the district, to kind of show more details of this.
I'll say basically Alec 5 has created it, and what it is a schematic picture, basically, with their software, and to show you what the site lighting will look like in the signage, show you, the bus yard is a fuel tank, it's just sort of a snapshot of what the overview looks like. It also has a budget, so you'll see where that budget comes from, and we'll be able to ask the professionals if you have any questions of why and how and what things cost. And also where they come up with those values, if you so choose. But it's more of a generalized picture of what it would look like.
Okay.
This kind of-
So is there a cost to that, or is that the professional cost that you're talking about in
That-
April?
Like,
That's different.
next month is not a cost.
Okay.
Once we move forward, that's part of our agreement as, they're partners with us, so they sort of do that, and it's not really a cost, it's as we go forward, then we sign a formalized agreement to develop those plans.
And do you know what any of those costs are, or does it depend on the plan?
Each
obviously?
plan is different, and it'll be on their sheets as soft costs next month.
Okay.
So you'll see clearly what it is, because for instance, the bus yard and the site lighting, except for the signage part, doesn't really involve Alec 5, it's a professional engineer. And then our construction manager is also always involved with the bidding process, because he puts the documents together, verifies all the bidders, and makes sure everybody's up to par what they need. So those 2 fees, you'll see them as soft costs. And it varies, it's usually a percentage based on the dollar amount of the project. That's usually what
I
it
was
is.
gonna say, that's somewhere where you get some efficiencies in terms of the size of the project, because sometimes the larger the project, the smaller the percentage of the fee. As you do small projects, the fee is 5-6% of the cost of the project sometimes. So it's usually a percentage of the overall cost of the
And
project.
usually, for an auditorium project, for instance, we'll contract with Alec 5 as our architect, and then they contract with the engineers. Whereas on the smaller ones, we'll contract directly with the engineers. That way, for those big projects where multiple services are involved, it's just easier to go right through one source. Alec 5 is our representative.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the prices you have on include what we estimate the fees to include as well.
That is correct, yes. That's an all-in cost.
That's
of
an
what's on
all
there.
include, the cost on the screen you see is the all inclusive cost with what it will cost for the, what we expect the bid to come in at for construction, but also the fees for the professional services. And any plans or permits or any of those things that you obviously need as part of those.
Okay, your questions.
Yeah, I actually have one. Or, and that if you can't answer this, that's okay, but, how do we prioritize these projects? So obviously the water line, that needs to be fixed. But the other thing, the bus yard updates and like the site lighting, why are those things more important than say some of the other things? And then my second question is, were all of these projects, were these things that Alloy 5 recommended prior to doing? Or did the bus yard upgrades occur because we've then purchased gas buses? Like, was that part of the original plan?
Sure. So it's a multiple fold answer for that. So safety and security usually gets the highest priority. And if you remember in your feasibility study, there's a scale in there of 1 through 5 and you prioritize items. And safety and security certainly gets the highest level of concern, which is what the site lighting is. And then we also look at the occupant use and the district's want and desire to upgrade something, how does it improve for the students, what does it improve for the staff? And so that's how the middle school auditorium gets, I'll say, higher on the list. As far as operational, we don't do a lot of things for the operations component of the district. And since we have the number of gasoline vehicles that we have, it's a determination that I make. And I'm looking at that scale and the number of drivers that have to go out. There's a little bit of savings, it's small, and the higher gas is right now, the better the savings when we buy a tanker load. When gas, what it was 3 years ago, it's not really a savings because we don't pay taxes on those cars like we do as citizens at the pump. So we look at that, we look at the number of drivers, the potential for the accidents with the buses going into those, gas stations, so to speak, all of those things. And we try to prioritize what's the most important. And it's not easy. It's really not easy. And you try to make your best estimate that you can and your best decision that you can, and that's how they get decided. And then this last and final component is working with Ryan. What can we do and afford? And what becomes a bigger part of the project where we have to borrow? What is the willingness to go out to borrow? Because if the middle school, in a perfect world, that middle school big project would all happen in one grand thing, but that would be a borrow. We can't afford it internally. So how can we help the district with the funds that we have slotted for? That's sort of a simple answer.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
So the prioritization comes from the administration based on those guidelines that they operate within, but the final approval is from the board. But we ask that they come with recommendations based on all of the input they have from the people and the teachers and everybody else, all of the stakeholders, and then make a recommendation to us, but we can change that. Put one ahead of the other.
So before we move on, is there the opportunity to walk through some of the larger projects to see before we vote?
Sure, and anytime
those.
you want to, I'll certainly show you around and how it works, what goes on and what it performs with.
Yeah, because when you listen to some of the upgrades, you're like, oh, what is the, why does this have to be fixed? I think it's one thing to hear about it, it's another thing to see it,
Yep.
and then how it would benefit our students and staff.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the facility master plan?
Yeah, I guess, the question I have, and we've walked through many of these projects before, and they're always difficult conversations, right? Is it, weighing the cost of a $2.5 million project against potential outcomes? Is it nice to have? Is it, in some cases like middle school auditorium, yeah, we know the sound is pretty bad in there. We know there's some ADA compliance issues in there. But at the same point, it's $2.5 million coming out of or living with right now a current state where we can't raise taxes enough to keep up with the increase in costs with PSERs and salaries and everything else that's going on. And so I struggle a little bit with this, not knowing what our cost base is actually going to be a year from now. We know we're paying more, right now in many cases for bus drivers and and other support staff. We know we have issues with recruiting substitutes, retaining teachers. List goes on. We're facing, a inflationary environment of who knows what at 5%, 6%, who knows, right? So I do think we're going to have to take a hard look at this, relative to our financing potentials here and what we can increase taxes by. I think it's also important that we, as a school board, recognize that we don't just support the students in the school, we actually support the entire community that pays taxes for the district. So that's an important consideration as well, that, as new school board members, we have to always remember it's not just about the parents that show up at the meetings. It's the entire district of taxpayers that we actually represent. So I hope, as we get into the next meeting, it might be difficult, or we might have to kind of really prioritize the must-haves from the nod, and we've got a $6 million HVAC project that might quickly turn into a $7.5 million project pending parts and equipment and labor that we keep kicking the can on. That is a awfully big number that we kind of need to plan for.
Well said. Anything else? Joe?
Just as a point of clarity, I'm hopeful that Alloy 5's presentation will be a little more specific toward just the projects we're talking about and looking at, instead of what happened with reconfiguration and what we went through. But I don't want to be surprised with anything.
It's specific to those three things.
I'm just making sure.
And Joe, that
I'm
was,
shell shocked, so
just to clarify, that was the whole master facility plan when they did it.
I know.
Okay, so when they did the plan, the book that you all received, that's the presentation with everything they found in the whole district that you're talking about,
And
which we're
that's-
still operating
And
on.
that's still in the
And
archives.
that's
That's still in the archive. That's right, yeah.
It's still there, but we don't have money to buy it.
Yeah, that was the whole evaluation that's done every 5 years or so.
Any other questions before we leave this topic and move into budget discussion? More money. Okay, Ryan?
All right, so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about budget strategies and have a discussion about that. There's a lot of slides to go through. I'll try to be brief. Please stop me if you have any questions, but I know Mr. Leiser appreciates a brief presentation, so I'm going to try to run through this as quickly as I can.
He's not the only.
All right. Then everyone appreciates a brief presentation. All right, so for tonight, our agenda is really to go over our budget goals, our fund balance, our millage options, remind you of our budget summary from January, talk about budget and strategies, which are your fund balances, and our next steps. So I'm not going to reread all these goals like I did last meeting, but as we start getting into the dollars and cents of the budget, it's important to really remember what our goals are and ensure that our budget is in line with our instructional and operational needs. So you'll see our total fund balance, and this is as of 6/30/2021. Your non-spendable fund balance is 690,000, and this really is the amounts that cannot be spent because they're in non-spendable form or legally required to be maintained intact. So things like your inventory and your prepaid expenses. Your restricted fund balance is 183,000. Those are amounts constrained to be used for specific purposes as per external parties or law. So your scholarships, your foundation expenses are in there. Committed fund balance is $7.9 million. And those are the amounts constrained to be used for a specific purpose as per the board. So the board commits those funds. Assigned fund balance, 6.3 million, and there's a sign of the amounts constrained to be used for specific purposes as per the superintendent and the business administrator. Your unassigned fund balance is 1.2 million, and those are available for any use. And we do use those traditionally to fund our budgetary reserve. So overall, your total fund balance as of 6/30/2021 is $16.4 million. So here's a breakdown of our committed fund balance, and these are the funds that are committed by formal board action You have $2.9 million in your other post-employment benefits, $1.4 million in healthcare stabilization, $2.2 million in retirement stabilization, $404,000 for Emmaus bond pool stabilization, $313,000 millage rate stabilization, and $650,000 for energy stabilization. So overall, that's $7.9 million. We move to assigned fund balance. Sorry. Stacey, can you go back to assigned fund balance? So here's a breakdown of our assigned fund balance, and these are the funds that do not require formal board action, but they are created to help offset shortfalls and help with our long-term planning. So technology, $946,000, curriculum, textbooks, and materials, $2.1 million, capital projects, $1.4 million, plus replacements, $410,000, athletic student clubs, $5,000, and our budget appropriations, $1.3 million. So overall, you have $6.3 million in your assigned fund balance. So this is a visual of our fund balance trend since 2012, and as you can see, we peaked in 2015, and over time, we remained pretty stable and started to draw down on those balances. And the last bar is our projections for our current year, 2022. Last meeting, we approved the resolution not to exceed the Act 1 index of 3.4%. So this would generate over a little over $1 million in total tax revenue and cost the average taxpayer $132 for the year. This is certainly our recommendation, what we are building our budget around right now, but the board certainly has other options. So for example, I show you 1.7%, which is half of the index, and would generate half of the revenue amount, $503,000, and would have half the impact on the average taxpayer. And this is the budget summary you saw in January. So these numbers are still as of January. So for a 22-23 budget, we had estimated revenues of $47.2 million, estimated expenditures of just over $50 million, estimated shortfall before any millage increases of a little over $3 million. That 3.4% index increase, if the board goes with that, would be a little over $1 million, and a revised shortfall with that millage included would be a little over $2 million. So there's a lot of work to do before now in June to reduce the shortfall, whether that's through a reduction of expenditures, an increase in revenue, fund balance use, or a combination of all three. Tonight, we're going to talk about fund balance and its appropriate use in helping to offset that shortfall. So our other post-employment benefits, otherwise known as OPEB, GASB 45 is the accounting pronouncement for accounting and reporting by employers for post-employment benefits other than pensions. So really for us, it includes our post-retirement healthcare benefits for those employees that are contractually eligible. So it requires reporting in the financial statement and requires a biannual actuarial evaluation. And the funding strategy in the past has been to utilize use of fund balance to current year cost for retiree healthcare coverage, which we estimate to be approximately $50,000. So moving forward, we recommend that we continue to budget the actual cost of the retiree healthcare benefits through that use of fund balance. So moving along to our fleet replacements, here are the ages of our buses and vans as of January. We typically use a 15-year age limit for replacements, but that also depends on a mechanical analysis as well. You can see we have 6 buses and 4 vans at or above that 15-year mark. So our fleet replacements, for transportation, replacements have historically been budgeted at $230,000 annually, anticipating 2 buses and 1 van. So our estimated needs for 22-23 are 3 buses at an estimated $110,000 per bus, and 2 vans at an estimated $45,000 per van, and I expect those numbers to increase based on inflation and how the market is now. So our recommendation for that is to utilize our current budget funds and increase the budget through the use of fund balance to cover the additional funding needed for replacements. And Mr. Oakes, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, and the reason for 3 buses this year is the inability to get one this year, essentially is what it is. We've had it budgeted for We were not successful to be able to get it in time, so we're just gonna package them together for next year. Order them in July if you approve the budget, and that way we'll facilitate that whole fiscal year to be able to get there.
Yeah, so Mr. Delacroix said carry the funds over, so you see, Brian's recommendation would be to utilize current budget funds and the leftover funds from this year to purchase the funds.
Yeah, and you'll see it as we go through these slides. In our final slide, you'll see the fleet replacement assigned fund balance of only 100,000. That's because we are utilizing those current year funds. Good, Art?
Yes, thank you.
So our heating oil and diesel fuel, in years where the district selects fluctuating pricing on heating oil and diesel fuel bids, an additional amount per gallon has been budgeted with the Energy Stabilization Fund balance to mitigate the risk of price spikes throughout the year. So our budgeted rate per gallon is $3 with $2.50 funded through millage and 50 cents funded through our fund balance, with the projection that the actual rate would be around $2.50. Recommendation is if the district selects a fluctuated pricing to budget an additional 50 cents per gallon above the current fluctuating price to mitigate the risk of the price spike. So this will be a tough one because oil has been high this year and we have not done our oil bid yet. So when those numbers can come back, we can discuss what the appropriate plan of action will be, whether we select fixed or fluctuating rate, and we can update that at this time.
When does that happen? What time of year does that happen?
I think we would be bringing that back to the board in May. We're just preparing for that now.
Okay. I think we've been pretty fortunate making the right decision the last few years about fluctuating our fix. But
yeah,
who knows where we're headed.
So it'll be interesting to see those numbers when they come out soon. So our PSER stabilization. So our current balance as of June 30th, 2021 is 2.2 million. And the fund balance is utilized to minimize and smooth employer contribution rate increases from year to year. So when our employer contribution rate was low, the district transferred planned budget funds to the reserve. In recent years, when an employer contribution rate has been high, with large year-to-year increases, the district utilizes fund balance as a budgeting tool to help manage increases over a long period of time. So these are the PSER's projected rates. If you look in that second gray column, you'll see for 22-23 that the employer contribution rate is 35.26%, and that jumps down to 37.1% in 28 and 29. If you look in the other gray column, and that is the rate that we're planning to build into the budget. So for next year, we are planning 33.5%, with the remaining difference between both gray columns coming from fund balance. So what does that look like in terms of dollars? You can see our payroll costs as of January are expected to be little 20.7 million. Our employer costs or PSERs then would be 7.3 million. We plan to budget 6.9 million with the remaining 346,000 out of fund balance. So as you see in that last column, we slowly draw down our fund balance as the budget rate and our actual costs get closer together.
Ask a question.
Yeah.
I think today PSBA sent an email out and there was an article about how the PSERs were being investigated for misrepresenting, or I don't know what the term was, the performance of the investments. And they had a lower projected cost for us based on
Us being Pennsylvania, not us, not us.
Yeah, Pennsylvania. And this is still being looked at. And instead of coming to us with a decrease, now we have another increase. And, you know, this is saying this 35% is, we take the full salary of all our PSER people, all our employees, and 35% of that salary has to go into this retirement fund. I mean, it's just unsustainable. But do you have any insider information about where that's heading?
I wish I did. I'm curious to see how that investigation turns out.
Yeah,
and
I
how
don't know
much
what,
taxpayer
I don't know
money
what
was
the
wasted.
numbers are.
I think we all are waiting to see what this investigation will show.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following it. I mean, I would say, John and I talked a little bit about this today, so I kind of looked at it and laughed. You know, the Peasers Fund has been in trouble all the way back to Tom Ridge in terms of the funding structure of it, and it's been underfunded. Most recent investigation is about, yeah, some amount that they gave from a financial firm of theirs that was not as transparent, I don't believe, to their board. So there is an investigation going on. I believe there was a report released yesterday, which I didn't see the report, but I saw the summary of the report, and they said there's no criminal wrongdoing, but I do believe the FBI is still involved in terms of where it sits. And so the amounts you see, I believe, are a small portion of that issue. This has been a long-standing funding Peasers issue. That's why they tried to make some changes with the new employees coming into the system. As new employees, there's a different rate they can select from. But yes, I think everybody's anxious to see where the report's going to end. I believe they issued at least a portion of the report yesterday, but I do believe the FBI is still involved to determine their more wrongdoing.
So we just have to plan with what we got.
Yeah, they certify the rate. So the rate that Ryan gave in the report, in the information, is not contingent upon any of the investigations. So they certify the rate every year, and the rate he's using to fund is the rate they've certified.
And those numbers can change moving forward, but as far as that 35.26%, that is the number we will be using that is certified for next year's budget.
Thank you.
And that number, just to, if I'm remembering, and this is from memory, when we started talking about the Peaser stabilization fund, or when that was a, kind of a bigger discussion, I would say 3, 4, 5 years ago, at least, maybe longer than that, right? Somehow I had in my recollection that we were capping out at like a 34 to 35% number, and that was what we thought the maximum, to be. And now we're looking at 30, it's still going up. So we are going to run out of our stabilization money here.
Yeah, you just hope at that point, as you see that they come to, like you see the 37 and the 3710, that you come to a point when you run out of money, that you have appropriately funded in your budget what the rate is, and you can take it up from there. But you will then essentially be funding the increase in the rate that they certify every year out of your millage.
Yeah.
So you try to get to a place that hopefully our 37 and 37.10 is somewhere close when you run out of money, which is what we're estimating now, but they recertify those rates every year. So we will adjust every year.
8 and 12, 8, 10, 12.
Yeah, we're not seeing those huge spikes that we did previously. If you recall, if you were on the board or were familiar with it, that, I mean, even since 2010, almost going up like a roller coaster, but now we seem to be reaching the top, but we're still seeing those increases year to year. I really probably expect that moving forward. So our recommendation for the Peasers budget strategy would be continue current funding strategy and utilize that fund balance to smooth out Peaser employer rate increases. So our Emmaus bond pool rate stabilization fund. So we have 2 variable interest rate debt issuances. Historically budgeted 3 to 4% interest rate based on recommendations from PFM, and we transferred the excess budget funds to fund balance. So our current rate as of January 2022 was 1.01% and 1.2%. So there will likely be 4 rate hikes this year, probably at a quarter each. So even with those rate hikes, that still keeps us under that 3%. But if things do go higher than that 3%, we do have refinancing options to look into. So that being said, our recommendation would still be to continue budgeting 3%, with funding 1.5% with millage and 1.5% with fund balance, so approximately $200,000. Curriculum, textbooks, and materials. So historic budget level historically the budget level amount has been $230,000 for textbooks and materials, and we use fund balance if any additional funds are needed. So 22-23 additional estimated funds needed for new curriculum, textbooks, and materials is $100,000. Estimates may be revised based on recommendations from the curriculum task force. So this is done to levelize those spikes in our curriculum cycles for those years where the materials are higher due to certain subjects. So the recommendation is to fund the full $100,000 of additional new curriculum textbook and materials through the use of fund balance. The budgetary reserve is really our contingency fund built within our budget. So the purpose of that is to cover unplanned expenditures or to cover expenditures that result in additional costs compared to our estimates. So this has historically been funded through millage or a combination of millage and fund balance. And we recommend to fund the full 400,000 of budgetary reserve through the use of our fund balance. And this is one of those categories that if we don't need that $400,000, it was budgeted with the use of fund balance, and then it'll flow back into fund balance. And this next slide is really how we plan on funding that shortfall. So you have that January shortfall of just over $3 million. A restricted fund balance use with our scholarships of 15,000, and this is really the ins and outs of the scholarship. We have committed fund balance. We have the Emmaus bond pool 200,000. The OPEB we talked about 50,000. PESER stabilization 365,000. Energy stabilization 90,000. Our senior tax rebate of 30,000. And for those that don't know, the board implemented for tax rebate for seniors. It has traditionally come from our village stabilization fund. Assigned fund balance 100,000 for fleet replacements. We have athletic club funds 5,000, and those athletic club funds are one of those student activities funds that the general fund now handles. Used to be separate, so this is just budgeting for the carryover funds for that club, for those clubs. Our curriculum that I just talked about, 100,000, and then we have unassigned fund balance, planned use just for the budgetary reserve of 400,000. So total proposed use of fund balance is 1.3 million. You have that proposed millage increase, which is the index increase, and the remaining shortfall after that is $673,588.
Just two things to note. I mean, obviously the $700,000 is what our work will be from here on, cutting the budget to be able to make obviously a balanced budget for you come May and June. When Mr. Kish said, it's the information that's in there. If we don't spend the $400,000, it will roll. All of our fund balance strategies he talked about tonight are that way. So if we don't spend what we anticipate in fund balance in oil or in OPEB or in PESERs will be one we will draw down on because it's a rate, but any other of those funds, when you see at the end of the year, we have a variance and we're rolling money back in. Some of that is purposeful. So the $400,000, if we don't use it, it will roll back in. But it's silly to put it in millage and tax folks when you're not going to use it. So we budget out of fund balance and it will be purposefully rolled back in should we not use it.
Just a little history for looking at this, the $3 million that we started out with as a shortfall this year again, which has been like that for the last several years. And we have made $1 million cut last year in staffing to try to close that gap between expenses and revenues. The biggest revenue that we've been seeing over the last several years is that tuition money going into the charter cyber schools, which is approaching $3 million. 2.7 last year, I think. I don't know what it's going to be this year yet, but and that number used to be, 5 years ago, that number used to be 30, 60, under $100,000. Then it jumped to $250,000, then it jumped to $750,000, and now it's up to almost $3 million that is moving out of this district, creating this $3 million gap. And the only way we can fix it, because we can't raise taxes enough to pay for that cyber charter, the only way we can fix it is to cut back on our own programs. So we're hurting our own kids and staff by footing the bill for sending these kids into the charter cyber system. That's just a high level view of, you might ask, why is this $3 million gap every year for the last several years? And that's what's happened. That's what's created it. So, yeah, and until the state comes up with some new funding plan for cyber charters, we're going to be stuck with trying to pull this out of our own hide. and minimize the impact on their own kids. Thank you.
Not done yet.
Well done.
Not done yet.
Oh, yeah, you got one.
But- One more slide, but I just wanted to add, point out, you have that remaining shortfall of 673,000. And again, that's if the board, raises to the index. If the board decides not to, that number will certainly rise, and, we have to use, cut expenses, somehow raise revenue, or use additional fund balance. And when we use that fund balance, we want to make sure that we're utilizing that for one-time things, not reoccurring costs, because that's how you really draw down that fund balance quickly. And then we get into a situation where the district is in financial trouble. Just my last slide. Somehow come out. Casey, can you give me the last slide?
Yeah.
Just our timeline. I just wanted to remind you of, there still is a lot of work, a lot of questions, not just the oil prices, but state budget. What will the governor propose? What will legislators settle on? Staffing meetings, board updates, and we have proposed budget presentations on May 4th. Final budget adoption, May 11th. We have June 1st, final budget presentation, and our final budget adoption on June 15th. That's all I have now.
Okay. Any questions for Ryan? This is, we'll do this every month. Until we, work through this timeline. Every month as we get closer to that budget approval, we'll narrow that gap, or they'll narrow that gap for us. And good job.
Ryan, the one question I have, sorry, I don't know where you're gonna go.
Go ahead.
I'm struggling to visualize, you got on page 7, you show the fund balance. If I just take the assigned number as an example, 630.21, you have it at 6.357, drops to 6.202, and I guess I was assuming, although that is a 2022 number, not the 2023 number, right?
Are you looking at the fund balance trend? What's the
Yeah,
number
I'm
on
looking at the
slide?
fund balance trend, and I
Okay.
guess what I'm trying to figure out is there another way to show later in these slides, you show where you're kind of pulling money out of those different pockets. Am I just missing it, but is there an easy way to just show us what the
I didn't include the graph like that as part of this presentation, but moving
maybe-
forward.
Yeah, like when you have this funding shortfall
Yeah.
where you're pulling it out, maybe just show.
Yeah, moving
current
forward, I can
balance.
show you fund balance trend in the future
All right.
as we predict the drawdown of these fund balance
All right.
numbers.
All right.
And as you can expect, that makes our fund balance a lot smaller. So that's something I can certainly present in a future presentation.
Okay, Ryan, yeah. On slide. I apologize because I was on the other. On slide, there it is. On the assigned fund balance slide, it says capital projects, 1,464,000. But when we talked about where does that number fall in line in the master facility numbers we were seeing? Because when I go to 21, 22, it looks to me like that number is showing up as a 2,081,678 number. I'm not sure I'm looking at that.
You're talking 21, 22 of the master facility?
Yeah.
So if you look at the master facility plan, that capital projects assigned fund balance can be utilized in that available general fund balance in that second last column.
So that's the
So you will see that the
1,422.
number is different. That's because I have it budgeted to the exact dollar amount that we would need. So you wouldn't deplete the entirety of that capital projects assigned fund balance of the general fund. So obviously, if there's additional expenses or things get more costly, you can utilize, the entirety of the capital projects general fund.
Okay. Yeah, yes.
Any other questions?
And if I can just go back to Todd's question, I think you anticipated Todd's question, the 2022 line that you looked at does show the use of the fund balance. It doesn't show 2022 on.
Right.
Which was the project, so you answered projected, I think you wanted to know 2022
22 and.
and beyond, okay,
Yeah,
yeah, it
that's
does
something.
show the 2022 uses, it doesn't show beyond, which I think is what
Yeah,
Ryan
that's a good
asked.
idea, and that's something I plan on including in the future.
Anybody else?
Oil and heating oil will be a wild card, I know we've been trying to get some intel on what we think that's gonna come in at.
Electric buses.
I
Future natural gas buses, if
You
we
thought
could
we
run
were
it up
jumping a
here.
year ago or 2 years ago. Coming.
I wish they were affordable.
Our buildings still run on
Solar.
I like
Solar
that.
buses.
Okay,
You could go horse.
all right, then we'll move on and continue into district finances. Next, we have the financial audit.
So there were no
All
findings in the
125
audit.
pages,
Was that?
all 125 pages.
Yeah, there were no findings in the audited financial statements as of June 30th, 2021. There was a note regarding GASB 87, and this is dealing with operating and financial leases. So this is a new standard that the business office team will be working through this year with Gorman Associates, who are our auditors. It changes the way that leases are reported and defined. So I wasn't planning on going into any more technical details on the audit, but certainly if a board member would have any additional questions, I'd be happy to sit down and go through it with them. I also have hard copies available. If anyone's having trouble sleeping at night, you can take one with you.
Have you mailed one to Phil Toll?
Ryan has not met Phil Toll, but we can get one.
I ran into him on the street the other day. I'm gonna ask him if he got the audit. Make
Would you
sure-
like me to mail
Yes,
him
can you
one
please
signed from you?
email? Yes. Can you, make sure Phil gets one. We appreciate his feedback. It's very
Well,
thorough. Man.
With all that levity, it is an outstanding audit. And the detail is just unimaginable in here. And then they call us a low risk audit, but they still have to do it every year. I don't know what it costs us.
25-ish.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at the last bid or a professional service thing we got, 25,000, I think.
They really do a thorough job. There's no sampling with this audit. They really go through everything.
As far as our fiduciary responsibilities to our taxpayers, I mean, it shows that things are really running well financially.
You have an excellent business office staff here.
Okay, any questions on the audit? Are we gonna have to take action in 2 weeks to approve, to accept that? Yeah.
Just on correct myself, audit fees 21,000 per department.
All right, so we will take action in 2 weeks to receive that. Tax collection committee, congratulations.
This is just myself replacing our previous business administrator on the tax collection committee.
Okay. We'll vote you in next in 2 weeks unless
Thank you.
somebody has an objection. All right, Heidelberg Township Deputy Tax Collector.
So the state allows for a tax collector with the approval of the taxing districts to deputize in writing a deputy tax collector who collects and settles taxes in the event of a tax collector's incapacitation. So Mrs. Jackham from Heidelberg is our newest elected tax collector, and she is deputizing Elizabeth Stetson with our approval.
Okay. And we will take action on that in 2 weeks. Any questions? Next item is our scholarship report.
So this item does not require official board action, but we bring this to you for your information. The district is responsible for maintaining the custodial funds for several scholarships. For senior awards, the sheet shows a scholarship anticipated award amount and number of awards and the total award amount. And again, this is not an action item, it's just for your information.
Questions? Next three items we reviewed earlier in the meeting, the budgets from Carmen Lehigh Intermediate, LPIC, and Lehigh Career and Technical. And that's kind of the summary. That's what we will be taking action on in 2 weeks to approve those budgets. And you have another couple weeks to review them, and if you got any questions, we can get those answers before we vote.
Well, I just wanted to add, as far as the LCTI budget, Ms. Holman explained earlier, there was a $195,000 increase to Northwestern's budgeted amount for our 22-23 budget. So that will certainly affect our budget moving forward.
You get what you pay for, and you send the kids down there, that's what we want, they're interested, and I'm glad to see money going for that rather than Peasers and oil and everything else that we.
I was just gonna say, it is a fine balance with our students going there. We have no issues obviously sending students, but we have had many discussions about exactly the point Mr. Weiser brought up, because it is this balance. It happens in two places. Because they equalize to 100%, any district that has large fluctuations, even over that one period, let alone 5 periods. It happens also sometimes with IU transportation, because it costs the same to run an IU bus, and it runs, wherever it goes. And you pay the same if it's one Northwestern student, or if there's 5 different students on that bus from 5 different districts, you're obviously cost sharing in that cost. It's the same thing with LCTI. So we've asked some of those same questions, no issues, obviously, with the students going to LCTI, and we certainly promote that a great deal. But you do watch that fluctuation over time. The Allentown Open Building 21, which has a career focus, and I do think that potentially, without speaking for Allentown, has some significant changes in their enrollment at LCTI.
Okay, anything on the reports that you'd like to point out to us?
Just wanted to mention your real estate tax collections overall, 95.86% collected, and that's compared to 95.83% the previous year. Delinquents turned over to Portnoy this year was 377,000 compared to 669,000 previous year.
Mr. Scholl would like that in a note too.
Okay, so we'll receive the reports in 2 weeks. Next item is old business. There is none listed, or neither. Is there any new business listed? Any old or new business from the board you'd like to put on the table? Okay, communications. Let me make a communication here. Maybe this is old business or new business, I don't know. But the memorial committee that's putting the Veterans Memorial in the Onawani Park, which you may be aware of. We have a huge 4-foot wingspan bronze eagle that's going to greet the visitors at the entrance column. And we asked the school if they would conduct a contest with students to name the eagle, to get the kids involved with the project, to come up with some kind of a patriotic, historically patriotic name for the eagle, the bronze eagle in the memorial. And Stacy put together a nice announcement to kick this thing off and to solicit names. And I'm not sure which grades or buildings are going to be involved with it yet, but I thought it was kind of neat to get the kids involved in that historical naming of the eagle for a patriotic Veterans Memorial.
And then you will introduce the winner, Memorial Day, and the announcement.
When we dedicate it in May on Memorial Day, we'll make that announcement of the winning student. So, moving on to courtesy of the floor. At this time, we offer once again, anyone who would like to address the board. You sat through this 2-hour meeting. Anybody like to address the board at this point?
Thanks for the good news on the tiers.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't want to waste more than 2 seconds. So thank you for the good news.
Jonathan Wozniak, local township. You guys have heard from me, you know where I stand. I just wanted to say it was very welcome news tonight to hear the announcement that Mrs. Holman made, and I'm sure that my wife's probably seen it by now, shared it with the kids. I'm totally expecting their reaction is much like Christmas morning, so hopefully I can get them to sleep tonight with the exciting news for tomorrow. And just
I'm sure that they're gonna be very happy that this last sliver of their life, starts to move towards that path of normalcy. So I just wanted to share that.
Anyone? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a quick question. Last time we talked about updating that tracker, that 14-day revolving. Do we know if that is gonna be updated just to kind of give us parents an idea? That way I don't know if you plan on sending out an email every 14 days
It's
or.
updated, so it's on the website where the old tracker was located.
Okay.
It's updated and the one that we showed on the last slide in the last presentation that shows you the building, the enrollment and the percentage by building is on the website where so go to nwlehisd.org/COVID-19 and it's on the trackers there.
Okay.
You can check it real time anytime you like.
Yeah, this correction we're making is not the end of the COVID mitigation that we're doing. We're still following the health and safety plan and we'll still evaluate all the things that we feel is appropriate to make decisions on mitigation.
I mean, one last comment, I know there was, tears when I made the comment, but there is one very important piece of information that's in the letter, which many people might not get to the last paragraph. But our entire goal the entire time was to keep kids in school as often as we can and to not disrupt their education. And that was the entire purpose. Some might have believed the timing was whatever in terms of whether it was right, wrong, or indifferent. But that has been our entire goal. And I believe we are at a place now where we can continue on the rest of the year and hopefully don't ever have to switch tiers or do any more weekly, let alone 14-day announcements of changes. And so we hope that, moving forward, not only can we keep the education intact, but we can keep, staff and students in school safely. That was the entire purpose. And we hope that that is our track for the rest of the school year.
Yes, sir. Mr. Blair.
I apologize for earlier because I didn't write down what I needed to say, but I guess part of what goes along with what you were saying is when we sent our son back to school today, we had a negative COVID test. The doctors knew he could return to school and he has a cough. So how does that change? Did we send our kid to school tomorrow?
I don't know exactly all of your symptoms, but you need to look at the screener on the symptoms. I know you disagree with what's in what column, but the symptom screener hasn't changed. So if he does not meet the screener, he should not attend school. So it depends on his symptoms. Tomorrow morning would be my answer.
Right, I understand that. Anything can happen between now and then. I guess my question is, if negative test, the doctors want to return to school.
We still don't want students coming sick.
He's not. Well, I don't want to argue. I guess I'm just saying. He coughed and he got something. I know his cough doesn't sound good. He had his tonsils out. We had bronchitis when he was a child, when he was a baby. And his cough is a regular cough. Doesn't sound good. That's, I guess, the only thing is, how do we go forward? We just keep him home?
Why don't you
If
touch
he's gonna-
base with your school nurse in the morning? I don't know enough about your child to make a
Right,
recommendation
I
at this
understand.
time.
I
Or-
understand.
yeah.
I'm not trying to be confrontational. I
Yeah,
guess
why
I'm
don't
just
you-
frustrated because going through that, I understand that if there's a fall. I understand. I guess my question is where do we go from here? We need to talk to.
I would talk to your principal and your child's nurse in the morning because I think you have to explain there's always going to be students that have, I'll use allergies as an example, that's going to hit us in the spring. We're not there yet because we have bad weather, but allergies are going to hit in the spring and we're going to come in to exactly the same things with sniffly nose or sneezing or sore throats or coughing, all that happen simultaneously that are to the cause of something else, not COVID related. And that's the next step we're going to have to do. So I would touch base with your child's nurse of the school and or the principal. And let's make some decisions about what needs to happen with them moving forward. The caution with the negative test always is at what point you test it and whether or not it's a false negative. But I don't know the timing on your situation enough to give you advice. I can talk to you after also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else like to address the board before we adjourn? We will be having a short executive, we won't have an executive session, it's going to be short. Immediately following this meeting, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mrs. Scheffler, second by Dr. Hunsicker. Meeting adjourned. Be careful going home. I'm going to start.